Okay, hey guys. So if you're watching this, it'll be a couple of days after my previous video released where we did this stuff right here. And I hope that all that made perfect sense to you guys. One way or another, I'm going to carry on and I'm going to show some other stuff. Look, let's be honest, I have not planned this out rigorously. I just want to produce something that is neat and helpful. So the thing that I had in mind today was to show you some intervals. Let's go ahead and start there. All right, so clean page. And as happens a lot with music theory stuff, the first thing we need to do is, okay, the first thing that we need to do is just make a list of all the notes that exist in real life. So we have C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. If you're a beginner, watch out here. There is not an E sharp. It goes straight to F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, and then watch out here also. There is no B sharp. It just goes straight to C. Okay, now these 12 notes, it's not necessarily a thing. Not necessarily. That pen got my hand disgusting. I thought that pen was okay, but it was busted. Okay, so we have 12 notes here, and generally 12 is just like an accepted number of how many notes actually exist. There's a couple of exceptions, but they're so rare that I don't even think I should be mentioning them right now. That's something for you to Google if you're really interested in that. But generally, it is just accepted. There are 12 notes in music. And a lot of what we're doing when we work with them is actually just we're playing with the distances between notes. The notes themselves don't usually have much of a sound that people can identify. It's the distances between notes and the combinations of notes that make things so cool and interesting. So, that in mind, I want to talk about intervals, which is like the distances between different notes and the names between intervals. And so, in order of importance, octave. So an octave is the distance from a note to the next of the same note. So this pattern, as I wrote it, that could go either direction for infinity. You know, it'll just keep going. It'll just keep going until human perception is no longer able to detect it. I know if it goes faster, it becomes light. If it goes slower, it becomes something else. I don't know. I'm not a science guy, right? But we have an octave. So an octave, this could continue C, C sharp, D. And an example of an octave would be from C to C, C to C, or D to D. Another example, C sharp to C sharp. Any note from a note to the next repeat of itself is that distance is called an octave. Probably next most important after that is a fifth. So a fifth, for example, could be C to G. A fifth could be C sharp to G sharp, D to A, D sharp to A sharp. Anything that distance is called a fifth. This will be familiar to people who play rock guitar because a fifth is a power chord. That when you play a power chord like that, say you're playing a power chord, this is fret 3 on the E string and this is fret 5 on the A string, that's a fifth. This is the root note, this is the fifth. It's the fifth one away. So that note would be do, re, mi, fa, so. And that's where the name fifth comes from. If you're in a major scale, like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, the fifth is the fifth note in the scale. So do, re, mi, fa, so, 5. Cool. All right, I talked a lot about it yesterday in the previous video. I don't know if I'm putting this out the very next day, but whole steps and half steps, and that's the most basic unit of a step. That's from a note to the next note, whether we mean the absolute next note, like in a half step, or if we mean the next note, but we're skipping over one, which is pretty normal. There's some ambiguity in how I'm saying this, but if you can follow along, that's good. So that would be a half step, F to F sharp. Another example of a half step, A to A sharp. Another example of a half step, C sharp to D. Or E to F. And then whole steps are where we skip over a note. So F sharp to G sharp. G sharp to A sharp. A sharp to C. That distance is a whole step. So we have half, whole. Sometimes the whole also. Sometimes it's called a second. That's kind of rare. You're not going to see it that much. Okay, next piece are the thirds. And there's two kinds of these that are worth knowing. Major third, minor third, these are slightly different. So let me try to explain this real quick. I'm going to partially reproduce this number line. So C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G. And so a power chord, like we talked about before, would be this distance, C to G. But count the number of notes here, right? Because we can fill the middle of it with another note. It'll sound beautiful. It'll be a kind of chord called a triad, 3-note chord. But here's the issue. 1 half step, 2 half steps. That's 2. And there are 2 notes that are equally in the middle of the fifth. It's an odd number. Actually, it's not an odd number. It's an even number. So think about this. I have 8 fingers, right? Which finger is my middle finger? And I know the funny answer is these. But if you're being sincere, you're saying, well, there's not a middle in an even number. There's always 2 in the middle, right? So there are 2 choices. If you were to pick this note to add into a power chord, add into a chord, that would be called a minor chord. Right? And the distance from the root up to that note is called a minor third. Because it's the third one, but it's the third one from a minor chord. Hope that makes sense. It's a little bit silly. It's a little bit forward when you're hearing it for the first time. Stick with it. Okay, if you were to pick the other note, E, right? That distance is slightly bigger from the root note up to the E. That would be what you pick if you want a major chord. And also called a major third. All right, quick note about this, and then we'll wrap up. When we have a minor third or a major chord, so for a minor chord, we have the root note. We're always starting on the root. Because if you don't start the chord on the root, it kind of isn't that chord anymore. It's some other chord. So we start on the root. The fifth is the most commonly included other note. It's very, very good sounding with the root. We want to fill it. So here we would put, for a minor chord, we would put a minor third. And here we would have a major third. All right, pay attention to this part. This is the actual interesting part. This distance is a minor third, right? This distance is a major third. But depending on these, will affect this one. So if this distance is a little smaller to make a minor third, That means the distance from here to here will be a major third. And if this one is a little bit bigger to make a major third, this one here will end up a little smaller to make a minor third. I thought that was cool. Some of you might know it already. Some of you might not know it. How is it useful to you? I don't know. Go be an artist. Figure something out. Play with the idea. That's what being creative is just play with it, right? So I can't tell you in super specific ways how you're supposed to use it or how it's useful to you. That's on you, the creator, to figure out. But some pretty cool stuff to notice, and if you haven't seen it before, it could come in really handy. And this stuff up here, I mean, I can't tell you what that's for. That's going to make it 100 million billion times easier to communicate with bandmates and to think about your own work as you're writing it. It's really good to put names to things. You'll just do so much better if you have the right names to call things that other people understand. And yeah, some of the words are silly. Some of the words are silly, and I might be able to do a better job if I rename everything, but then I'd almost be betraying you because you would be able to communicate with everything. You just have to start over if you really want to get anything done. So that's it for the video today. I hope you enjoy this. I hope it's helpful, and it will really help me if you like and subscribe and leave a comment and all the other things that the YouTubers have told you. Do that for me too, please. Take care of yourself. Adios.